Chapter 3026. It was quite sad for a virtuous paragon to reach this level. Yuzun shouldn't have lived like this. He was a virtuous paragon. In the entire universe, including the secondary universe, who could be his match? He could call the wind and rain and change countless laws and laws. However, in order to ensure the survival of the original universe, he didn't want the third planet to be destroyed. He used the formation to guard it for countless years, tirelessly. Yuzun was touched because Yi Qinghan still recognized him as an ancestor. This made Yi Qinghan even sadder. Was someone who didn't even recognize an ancestor still human? Yi Qinghan slightly squatted down, not wanting Yuzun to look up and talk to him. Yi Qinghan respectfully said, "Ancestor is too polite. Everyone in the third planet knows about Yuzun's merits. Qinghan's foundation is also in the dragon-seeking country, so how could I not recognize ancestor?" Yuzun gestured for Yi Qinghan to come over. Yi Qinghan didn't hesitate to squat in front of Yuzun's wheelchair without any disrespect. Yuzun reached out and stroked Yi Qinghan's black hair as gently as a father caressing his child. Yi Qinghan, who hadn't been touched for many years, wanted to cry. A child wants to be raised, but his parents don't. A tree wants to be quiet, but the wind doesn't stop. Yi Qinghan really wanted Yuzun to enjoy his old age and not use his merits and life to exchange for the continuation of the third planet and the original universe. Yuzun whispered, 10 tribulations and 10 lifetimes, it must be very hard, right? Yi Qinghan suddenly felt that the 10 tribulations and 10 lifetimes were worth it. Because of this sentence, he had no regrets. Yi Qinghan firmly shook his head and said, "It's not hard at all. This is not even 1/10,000th of the torture you went through." Yuzun's murky eyes stared at the sky. The blue sky was clear and white clouds floated in the air. His aged hand stroked Yi Qinghan's hair. The world was peaceful. Even if it's just 1 in 10,000, it's still very difficult. Yuzun understood what he was going through. It was torture day after day, year after year. There was nothing more painful than watching his own merit and life dissipate bit by bit. Just being able to see the peace of the third planet was enough for him. Virtuous paragon Yuzun softly said, "The more we give, the less suffering the common people will suffer. Children, persevere and show me hope. The saints of the secondary universes are too stubborn and need absolute power to suppress them. I'm old and can't do that. The rest will depend on you young people." Yi Qinghan nodded resolutely. Although saving the world wasn't his goal, if he wanted to revive so many people, he had to reach the level of a ruler. Different paths led to the same goal. Virtuous paragon Yuzun looked at Yi Qinghan's humble attitude and knew that this was the person he had chosen in his heart. This was someone worth trusting. Virtuous paragon Yuzun softly said, "Child, let me see your little white cloud. Maybe I can help you solve your doubts." Yi Qinghan didn't hesitate at all. He could not trust anyone, but he trusted this virtuous paragon unconditionally. Whoosh! Yi Qinghan took out the little white cloud. At this moment, it was only a clump. Virtuous paragon Yuzun reached out to take the little white cloud. It didn't reject him and instead happily wrapped around his old arm. It kept rubbing against him like a puppy rubbing against its master. This should be the deepest form of recognition. Even Yi Qinghan didn't receive this treatment despite him saving its life. It was the aura of virtuous paragon Yuzun that made the little white cloud recognize him. Virtuous paragon Yuzun held the little white cloud with both hands and softly sighed. He whispered, "Long time no see, I didn't expect you to still be alive." This sentence shocked the elderly lord, Yi Qinghan, Zhang Daoling, and the divine bird. They didn't expect virtuous paragon Yuzun to have seen this little white cloud. The elderly lord asked in surprise, "Virtuous paragon, what is this thing?" Virtuous paragon Yuzun smiled and stroked the little white cloud in his palm. His eyes flashed with a complicated emotion as he murmured, "Back then, I found a large clump of sovereign energy, but it was attached to a clump of white cloud. It was this little white cloud. This little white cloud was stained with the sovereign's origin energy and can be considered a companion of the sovereign's origin energy. Perhaps its existence is to protect the origin and growth of the sovereign's energy. I was in a rush to use the 9 sovereigns' origin energies to suppress the 9 cauldrons, so I didn't pay attention to this little white cloud. However, this little guy followed me the whole way. In the end, I was running out of time, so I sped up. By the time I laid down the formation and came back to find it, it was already gone. Sure enough, this clump of energy wasn't the sovereign's energy. It was only a companion of the sovereign's origin energy. It was an existence similar to the sovereign's Tao protector. However, when it was protecting the sovereign's origin energy, it wasn't as strong as the sovereign's origin energy. Virtuous Paragon Yuzun calmly said, "It can change its shape at will. Let's call it Xing Yun. However, you guys should just call it Little White Cloud. Don't casually reveal its existence, or it will attract other sages to fight for it." Yi Qinghan nodded repeatedly, agreeing with the name Virtuous Paragon Yuzun gave it. Yi Qinghan said respectfully, "Thank you, old ancestor, for giving it a name." Virtuous Paragon Yuzun smiled and handed the Xing Yun to Yi Qinghan. Little White Cloud seemed a little reluctant, and it clung onto Virtuous Paragon Yuzun's wrist. Yi Qinghan didn't know if he should take it back or give it to Virtuous Paragon Yuzun. Chapter 3027. His words shocked everyone. Even the elderly lord, a veteran sage, was shocked to the point of dizziness. Yuzun had never mentioned such a thing before. The reason he didn't want to talk about it was because he didn't want others to shoulder this burden. However, he felt that he was at the end of his life and wanted to give this responsibility to Yi Qinghan. However, he was worried that Yi Qinghan was too young, so he asked the elderly lord and Zhang Daoling to help. If someone else gave this responsibility to Yi Qinghan, he would refuse without hesitation. However, Yuzun was different. How could a descendant refuse a task from an ancestor? Moreover, the pain and price Yuzun had to pay for the inheritance and words of the primal universe was tens of thousands of times greater than Yi Qinghan's 10 tribulations and 10 lifetimes. Even a sage wouldn't be able to bear this. This was why he was a virtuous paragon, an unparalleled virtuous one. The 9 virtuous paragons were called so because they had virtuous merits and were loved by the people of the secondary universe. This meant that they were on the same level as the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors. These people were very powerful. The sages of the secondary universe aren't enough to make us helpless, but virtuous paragons are different. They cost Ho Yi's life and Yellow Emperor's life. The Nong sovereign fell while the Sui sovereign and the others were gravely injured. Yuzun took a deep breath as if he had returned to that battle. This was a real legend coming from Yuzun's mouth. It was definitely not a fabricated myth. Most of the myths and legends of the 3rd planet were based on falsehoods and fabricated characters. Most of these myths and legends didn't exist, but Yuzun's myths and legends all existed. They were all sages and even virtuous paragons. Sovereign Yu closed his eyes in exhaustion and whispered, "The secondary universe is much larger than the 3rd planet and countless times larger than the primal universe. There are countless of them and they can bear a lot of merits. That's why those paragons can't be killed and can only be suppressed. I've spent my entire life using the 9 cauldrons to suppress the laws and principles of this place as well as the 9 paragons. Don't let this news out or it will cause a disaster. The sages of the secondary universe will do their best to destroy the 9 cauldrons formation." Yi Qinghan, since you have acknowledged me as your ancestor, I have no other request. I only ask that you pass on my responsibility. Otherwise, the deceased paragons will not be able to rest in peace and I will not be reconciled. Yuzun slightly opened his eyes and looked at Yi Qinghan who was squatting next to him. His eyes were full of expectation. Yi Qinghan firmly nodded. He didn't reject Yuzun's request. He had no way out. Qinghan will remember ancestors' words, Yi Qinghan said in a low voice. At that moment, Zhang Daoling whispered something into the elderly lord's ear. The elderly lord's expression suddenly changed. The elderly lord pondered for a moment and said to Yuzun, "Yuzun, there is someone in Yi Qinghan's insane manner who has been tainted with the Yellow Emperor's merits. I heard that this child's talent is extraordinary and his Tao heart is enough to crush anyone. How should we deal with him? He is still someone from the secondary universe. I'm worried that something unexpected will happen." Yuzun was startled and shook his head. I believe in the Yellow Emperor's merits and that there must be a reason for them to choose this person. Don't interfere with him. Yes. Zhang Daoling and the elderly lord replied at the same time. Manor Lord Yi wants me to go over and help nurture insane manor. Please give your orders, Lord Yuzun. Zhang Daoling bowed respectfully. Sigh, Yuzun sighed softly. If Yi Qinghan had a connection with the third planet sage, it was inevitable that the people of the secondary universe would band together to deal with Yi Qinghan. There were pros and cons. It was rare to have both. We can nurture them, but they must create their own sage techniques. This might take time, but at least the secondary universe won't band together. It will only benefit insane manner. Yuzun thought for a moment and nodded in agreement to Yi Qinghan's request. Yi Qinghan immediately replied respectfully, Old ancestor, this is not a problem. Qinghan doesn't ask for sages everywhere. As long as a few of the 10 or so people in insane manner become sages, it will be enough. I understand their talent. As long as they are nurtured by sages, it will be easy for them to surpass their masters. As for Senior Yen Emperor, I also believe in his character and merits. Since he has been tainted with the Yellow Emperor's merits, I believe in him even more. Yuzun nodded. After a short exchange, his face darkened even more. His life was slowly coming to an end. He really didn't have much time left. Yuzun smiled and grabbed Yi Qinghan's hand. The calluses on his hand made him look like an 80-year-old farmer's, not the hands of a sage. Is there anything else you want to ask? Yuzun asked in a low voice. Yi Qinghan took a deep breath and asked, Old ancestor, does the ruler realm exist? Has anyone reached it before? Can he really bring the dead back to life? Yuzun shook his head and said indifferently, reviving people depends on who they are reviving. If it's someone from the secondary universe, all you need to do is unblock the path of reincarnation. However, that would mean reincarnation, not true resurrection. To unblock the path of reincarnation, you don't need to be a ruler. As for the ruler realm, according to my understanding, it can be reached, but your realm is too far away. Once you are born, you can change the order and forcefully revive the dead. If you want to become a ruler, you have to gain the recognition of the original universe. Even if you become a ruler, you can't run amok, so things aren't that simple. Yuzun calmly reminded. Yi Qinghan doubtfully asked, Where is the path of reincarnation? The place where energy gathers. The primal chaos trench and the ancient torrent path are both part of the path of reincarnation. However, with the 9 cauldrons suppressing the original universe, the path of reincarnation can't be unblocked. If you want to revive some people, I'm afraid you'll need to cultivate to a level where you can suppress 9 virtuous paragons. Yuzun seriously explained. Yi Qinghan's mouth twitched. The primal chaos trench was a ravine between the secondary universes that could devour all things. Even a sage might not be able to enter it. One would need to have the power of a virtuous paragon to open it. Even if he and the divine bird worked together, they still wouldn't be able to do it. Yuzun patted Yi Qinghan's hand and softly reminded him, The dead are gone, there is no need to force it. If you want to become a ruler, then let nature take its course. Otherwise, all your efforts will be for naught. I was too stubborn back then, so I ended up like this. Remember this well. Yi Qinghan chuckled. If he wasn't stubborn, then he wouldn't have reached this step today. It was fine even if he couldn't become a ruler. As long as he suppressed the 9 virtuous paragons and then removed the 9 cauldrons grand formation, it would be enough to open the primal chaos trench and the ancient torrent path. As for becoming a ruler, who cares? Yuzun didn't say anything else. This matter required one to rely on oneself. It was useless to rely on others. He glanced at Sovereign Yi. He knew the ruler's energy inside the cauldrons the best. Sovereign Yi wasn't afraid of the heavens or the earth, but he was afraid of Yi Qinghan. However, he didn't revere Yi Qinghan since they were equals. He was afraid of Yuzun, so he kept his head down and didn't say anything. He didn't expect Yuzun to notice him. Chapter 3028. Supremacy Yi looked at Supremacy Yi and smiled warmly, causing Supremacy Yi to look up unwillingly. Supremacy Yi wasn't a so-called sage. There were 2 types of sages. One was those who became a sage by refining the ruler's energy. These people could forget about becoming a ruler in their lifetime, no matter how heaven-defying their cultivation was. The other type referred to people like Supremacy You, who had endless merit and relied on merit and cultivation to climb up step by step. If he hadn't refined the 9 cauldrons and established the world, perhaps a ruler would have already appeared. That was why Supremacy Ye didn't dare to speak carelessly in front of Supremacy You. It was the majesty that came from his bones that prevented sages from acting recklessly. Perhaps even Feng Yu and the other sages of the secondary universe wouldn't dare to act recklessly in front of Supremacy Yu, who couldn't attack. Supremacy Yu smiled at Supremacy Yi and said hoarsely, "Do you know why you can't use the power of a sage?" Supremacy Yi had talent, but his combat strength had always been trash. Within the same realm, he was practically the weakest. He could only rely on his brain and mouth to anger people to death. However, he didn't want to rely on his mouth. He wanted to be like Yi Qinghan and be able to defeat someone of the same realm with one punch. Supremacy Yi knelt beside Supremacy Yu and said, respectfully, "Supremacy Yu, please give me some advice." Yuzun shook his head and replied, "Because you are the law of order, but you cannot change the law of order. You can only make the law of all things operate according to your will. However, you are only 1/9 of the ruler's energy. You cannot become a ruler. The sage is your peak. If you want to become a ruler, you must merge with humans. If you don't want to be merged with humans and still want the sage to follow your will, then you must carefully comprehend how to make the world follow your will. I can't tell you this because I don't understand it either. Once you comprehend it, you will become a ruler. You should be able to rule everything." Supremacy Yi curled his lips and said helplessly, "How mysterious, but I have no clue at all." Yi Qinghan sighed softly. Not to mention Supremacy Yi, even he himself had no clue. Only a certain aristocratic family would be able to understand the words of a sage. "I'll give you a word of advice. Follow the law and change it. Only by breaking and then establishing can you become a ruler," Yuzun said in a low voice. Then he didn't say anything else. Perhaps he was too tired. He waved his hand and said, "All of you go back." Yi Qinghan stood up respectfully and slowly retreated with Sovereign Yi. The Grand Supreme Elder and Zhang Daoling did not stay behind either. They left the courtyard house. In the courtyard, pear blossoms danced in the air. Yuzun's hair was white and his withered body was even dimmer. He had already entered the countdown. At this moment, he knew what to do. Yuzun felt a stabbing pain in his heart. He couldn't help but groan. His rotten hands clenched tightly as the light around them scattered. Sigh. After persevering for so long, it's finally time to go. Yuzun took a deep breath. His body suddenly erupted with light, but it didn't rush out of the courtyard. Pear blossoms bloomed, competing with the heavens for beauty. Outside, just as the 4 of them were about to step onto the bamboo bridge and leave, cries of pain suddenly came from the courtyard. Several immortal children wailed, unable to conceal the sorrow in their hearts. Yi Qinghan subconsciously turned his head to look behind him. He could not help but feel a sharp pain in his heart. It was as if someone was clutching his heart. The Grand Supreme Elder and Zhang Daoling's expressions changed drastically. They turned around and rushed back. In the courtyard, only a pure white bone was left. It was something that looked like a relic and was only the size of a thumb. It was the last thing Yuzun left behind, and it was also the only thing left. Light enveloped the bone that was as white as jade. Merit was attached to it. It was too sudden. They were still communicating a second ago, but in the next moment, he had transformed into the Tao. Yi Qinghan and the others could not accept this reality. A few immortal children knelt beside the chair where Yuzun had transformed into the Tao. They cried bitterly, unable to suppress the sorrow in their hearts. Yi Qinghan brought the divine bird, the Grand Supreme Elder, and Zhang Daoling back to the courtyard. They looked at the pear blossoms dancing in the sky as if it was snowing. The sorrow in their eyes was indescribable. The Grand Supreme Elder and Zhang Daoling bowed and sent Yuzun off. Bang! Yi Qinghan knelt beside the chair and kowtowed 9 times to send the patriarch off. It was rare for the divine bird to be serious. It followed Yi Qinghan and knelt at the side without saying a word. "Ooh, The celestial child cried uncontrollably. It took him a lot of effort to stop crying, and he said to Yi Qinghan, "The ancestor's last words were for you to take the virtuous bone away. Also, the news of his death must not be known to the outside world." This bone was called the merit bone. It was a supreme treasure that only those with great merit could leave behind after transforming into the Tao. Even if the Grand Supreme Elder and Zhang Daoling had transformed into the Tao, they could not leave behind such a bone. Hiss! Yi Qinghan held the merit bone with both hands and covered his face. He did not want to be a savior, but that did not mean that he did not respect them. Yuzun was such a fearless savior. Moreover, Yuzun was one of the ancestors of the third planet, the dragon-seeking nation. The Grand Supreme Elder sighed. It was as if I saw space distort. The army was in an uproar. Lu Yang, a veteran expert of the Taigu Emperor, felt his hair stand on end. He felt a sharp pain in his spine. Is it the ancestor realm? Isn't there no ancestor realm in this secondary universe? Lu Yang muttered to himself in shock. At this moment, Yi Qinghan had already appeared in a main city countless miles away with Lin Yan. Lin Yan was so nervous that even his breathing was a little hurried. He looked at Yi Qinghan's back, who was standing on a lake. He was so nervous that he felt a little suffocated. Lin Yan did not know Yi Qinghan, but at this moment he knew that Yi Qinghan was not an ordinary person. He hurriedly bowed and said, "Say, Senior, thank you for saving my life." Yi Qinghan did not turn around and said coldly, "Introduce yourself, your family background, your cultivation process, and finally give yourself an evaluation." Lin Yan scratched the back of his head and looked at Yi Qinghan's back. He did not know what he was going to do, but he still introduced himself. Lin Yan's struggle was somewhat similar to Yi Qinghan's, but he had always been a lone wolf. He had no friends or partners. He had fought his way up, year after year, day after day, challenging and being hired. As for his family background, it was very simple. There were only old parents, a useless brother, and a young sister. He had been supporting the family all these years. After Lin Yan introduced his situation, he said seriously, "Self-evaluation. I think I'm a good young man with dreams, ambitions, ability, and filial piety. I can rely on my face to make a living, but I like to rely on my strength to make a living. Good. I admire your shameless spirit." Supreme Yi clapped his hands and said, Lin Yan was shocked by Supreme Yi's sudden appearance. He retreated a few meters away and looked at Supreme Yi in shock. He could not tell that Supreme Yi was younger than him, but his cultivation was so much higher than his. Chapter 30-31. That peak progenitor was extremely cautious. As soon as Tao Father Star Defiance had suggested that they kill the primordial yin-yang, he had been on guard. The primordial yin-yang couldn't be trusted, and neither could Tao Father Star Defiance. However, Tao Father Star Defiance didn't give him any time to think. He headed straight for the third planet, one of the 9 planetary systems. At that moment, the primordial yin-yang immortal world was stealthily approaching the ancient immortal world. However, the ancient immortal world was now guarded by the crazy manor. There were 4 experts stationed outside the chaos heavens: Shirgu, Monkey King Chiyan, Mu Zhuang, and Jiang Jingtian. The 4 of them were now peak progenitor realm experts. There was also a 3 million strong crazy manor army outside the barrier. It was impossible for anyone to enter the chaos heavens. The entrances to the Sky Seeker domain and the Sky Primal Chaos domain had been sealed. The only way out was to barge through the 4 experts and the military camp. The crazed manor had settled down for hundreds of years. They had stopped fighting long ago and were recuperating internally. In the north was the North Xiong Immortal Country, and in the south was the Manhua Immortal Country. These 2 countries were now vassals of the crazed manor. With these 2 countries at the front lines, the crazed manor could sit back and relax. And now, Zhang Daoling had already snuck into the heaven-suppressing palace, running around the 6 places to help the crazed manor's experts improve their cultivation level and provide them with the saint's order for them to study. The heaven-suppressing palace was the base of Kuang Manor, guarded by Gu Qingyu, Lin Wutian, Lin Mo, Yin Yunbei, Yi Tong, and the others. In the north were Yi Chenxing, Hualing Tian, Li Peiza, and the others. The army was guarded by the Void Saint Chess. The south was guarded by Green Lotus Sword Immortal, Zhua Shuguang, Charity Saint, Li Feng, Mo Li, Wu Jiang, and Yi Mingxi. The western war zone was guarded by Feng Huang, Si Wuxie, Su Zhan, Yi Chentian, and Desolate Lord Yi. The Yan Emperor was still alone on the Human Emperor's peak of the Yan clan. He was in the central position, ready to reinforce the Kuang mansion at any time. All the elites of the Insane Manor were in charge of the 6 major regions. Zhang Daoling spared no effort and traveled to the 6 major regions all year round to explain the sage's Dao and share his insights. All the experts were focused on their cultivation. Although their cultivation progress was not at a rapid pace, their progress was quite fast. Especially the Flame Emperor's progress, which made Zhang Daoling blush with shame. This person was tainted by the Yellow Emperor's merit and virtue. His talent was heaven-defying and he was full of luck. He forcefully increased his strength from 20% of the sage's strength to 40% in just 7 to 8 years. In recent years, Jian Bugui had been traveling the mortal world to help the people of the world, but he didn't care about the merits of saving the children. Those without parents were directly brought to Jingfan Mountain to be raised. Zhang Daoling's aura was restrained. As soon as he arrived at the sect, Jian Bugui seemed to have noticed him. He held the broom and slightly bowed. "Greetings, esteemed sir. I didn't know you were coming and didn't come out to greet you, please forgive me." Zhang Daoling looked at Jian Bugui with shock in his eyes. He's already a virtuous sage but no sage power. His merit is subdued and his strength is imperceptible. He'll definitely become a virtuous paragon next year. I didn't think there would be someone with such a state of mind here. Does Yi Qinghan not know? Zhang Daoling pondered while staring at Jian Bugui. Jian Bugui didn't seem to mind Zhang Daoling's stare. He knew that Zhang Daoling was a virtuous sage, so he gestured, "Since esteemed sir is here, why don't you sit down and rest for a bit?" Zhang Daoling finally reacted and quickly bowed. "Dao friend's state of mind is not as good as mine. Thank you for your trouble." Back then, Jian Bugui's aura had completely disappeared as long as the enemy didn't die. Now, he had sunk to a level where even Yi Qinghan couldn't look straight at him. Perhaps it was because of Zhang Fan's death that she no longer wanted to participate in the mortal world. She only wanted to use her own abilities to change the suffering of the world. Now, Jian Bugui's body was covered in a layer of faint golden light. Only sages could see it. That was merit, very pure merit, without any blemishes. "Esteemed sir, please." Jian Bugui gestured with his hand. The two stepped into the training ground. There were no sharp ripples in the huge training ground. Jian Bugui seemed to have forgotten that he was a cultivator and didn't teach these children. A few hundred children were playing in the training ground. Even if they saw a virtuous sage, they wouldn't be afraid because they didn't have the concept of hierarchy. Jian Bugui led Zhang Daoling to a pavilion at the edge and took out a pot of spirit tea. The fragrance was overwhelming. Zhang Daoling looked at the children and then at Jian Bugui, who was slowly sitting down. He asked in surprise, "Since Dao friend is a virtuous sage, why don't you cultivate the power of the virtuous sage to change and help more people?" Jian Bugui smiled and said crisply, "My heart is calm and I don't want to participate in the mortal world. Fighting will only make more people homeless. This is good." Chapter 3041. Yi Qinghan's words left Yan Emperor speechless for a long time. He had never experienced the primordial war, and Yi Qinghan definitely had not experienced it either. "Where did you get this information from?" Yan Emperor asked curiously. Yi Qinghan replied, "Virtuous Paragon Yuzun told me. He was the one who forged the 9 cauldrons to suppress the laws and logos of the original universe and seal the torrent path. The torrent path is a part of reincarnation, and the primal chaos trench is also a part of reincarnation. Soul energy gathers in the primal chaos trench, but it can't circulate through the torrent path. As a result, most people who die in the secondary universe can't reincarnate." Yan Emperor was shocked speechless. Fragments of memories kept flashing through his mind. Many ideas exploded in his mind, but he felt that it was inappropriate. Yi Qinghan was also afraid that Yen Emperor would forcefully break the 9 cauldrons' great array, so he said, "Senior, actually, we don't need to become a ruler to reincarnate for the Yen clan and the 9-colored Brahma heart. However, we need to have the strength to suppress the 9 virtuous paragons. Otherwise, even if we open the torrent path and the primal chaos trench, all our efforts won't be enough to withstand the destruction of the 9 virtuous paragons." Hiss! Yen Emperor took a deep breath. His fingertips trembled slightly, and the corner of his mouth raised into an excited smile. After working so hard for so long, he finally saw hope. If it wasn't for the sake of reviving the dead, why would he bother to step into the illusory ruler realm? Now that he knew how to reincarnate the Yen clan and the 9-colored Brahma heart, it was enough. Ha! Yen Emperor laughed, but his heart was filled with sadness. I understand. As long as I know where my endpoint is, it's enough to defeat the 9 virtuous paragons of the secondary universe. The flaming emperor stood up and took a deep breath. He flipped his hand and took out the ruler's origin energy. Since you said that I have great merit, then I will refine this ruler's origin energy and fuse it with me. Then I will become a virtuous paragon. I can't defeat 9, but I can defeat 3. The rest will be up to you guys. Yi Qinghan smiled. Since Yen Emperor could control his emotions, it was for the best. Yi Qinghan didn't dare to fight anyone in his life, but Yen Emperor was the only one he didn't want to be his enemy. Of the same realm without Little White Cloud, even if he and Supremacy joined forces, they might not be able to win. Yi Qinghan cupped his fists and said, "Thank you for your generosity, Senior. I didn't dare to tell you when I first heard the news. I was afraid that you would be too stubborn and cause a disaster. The paragons of the virtuous paragons. And the paragons and the 9-colored Brahma heart will be resurrected. Those virtuous paragons." Chapter 3042. In the Imperial Hall, Yi Qinghan was just about to go into seclusion to cultivate and strive to step into the sage realm, but Feng Xian did this to him, making him feel uneasy. Feng Xian was clearly swindling merit points by doing this. So what if it was swindling merit points? As long as it was great merit points, it could still push him to the sage realm. Are we swindling merit points? The divine bird walked out and suggested seriously. Yi Qinghan rolled his eyes. His facial expression was extremely rich as he said disdainfully, "Even if I die, I won't do something like that. I want to find out how Sage Feng Yu died. This matter is definitely not simple. I suspect that Feng Xian assassinated Sage Feng Yu and then framed us. If they want to frame us, then so be it. What can they do to us now?" Supreme Yi asked with disdain. Yi Qinghan pondered for a while and said in a deep voice, "I'm afraid that they will join forces to deal with us." Supreme Exalt Yi was suddenly filled with heroism as he slammed the table and clamored, "What are you afraid of? I'll protect you. If one comes, I'll kill one. If a pair comes, I'll kill a pair." Yi Qinghan's mouth twitched and he snorted, "Who gave you the courage?" Sovereign Yi grinned and said, "Regardless of whether we win or not, we have to show our imposing manner. Aren't you the best at this?" Yi Qinghan sneered and said mockingly, "That's because I have to face the enemy. What's the use of being arrogant in front of me?" Only Yi Qinghan and Sovereign Yi were left in the Imperial Hall. Although both of them were smiling, they were very cautious. Feng Xian suddenly became a sage and Sage Feng Yu died. No one knew what happened, but the only thing they were certain of was that Sage Feng Yu would definitely not help Feng Xian without fear. If it was Sovereign Yu, he would be willing to sacrifice himself to help others. Few would doubt this, but if it was a sage of the secondary universe, such a thing was impossible. Yi Qinghan and Sovereign Yi were thinking about their next step. "I think we should make a trip to the Heaven Surveyor subrealm," Yi Qinghan said in a deep voice. "I don't think we should be led by the nose by a rookie. Instead of wasting time on the road, it's better to stay and comprehend the sage's power. In the face of absolute power, everything is fleeting. In the face of absolute power, everything else was like floating clouds. However, to be able to cultivate to absolute power, it required time. A person without foresight would have immediate worries, and Feng Xian was obviously one of them. Yi Qinghan tapped the table with his fingertips, and a light flashed between his brows. Yi Qinghan seemed to have come to a decision. He stood up and left the main imperial hall. Emperor Yi was waiting outside. Emperor Yi had completely given up on cultivation and focused on handling political affairs. As soon as he saw Yi Qinghan walk out, he immediately went to greet him. "My son, inform Chen Tian and Lin Shukong to visit the Star Profound Sage and Qian Yixue in my name. Ask them what they're thinking. If there's a conflict with other sages in the future, they can stand aside and watch, but it's best if they don't become enemies with us," Yi Qinghan said in a deep voice. Emperor Yi did not object. The older generation was currently cultivating hard to break through to the sage realm. Only these two second-generation masters could be used. After Emperor Yi left, Yi Qinghan said to Paragon Yi, "Go and see how the others are doing. I'll go to Jingfan Mountain and ask Jian Bugui for advice on the sage realm." Paragon Yi had been following Yi Qinghan all these years. On one hand, he was afraid that he would be taken away by others, and on the other hand, he wanted to protect Yi Qinghan. Now that he was in the Kuang Fu territory, he did not need to merge with Yi Qinghan. Thus, when he heard Yi Qinghan's words, he ran away without turning back. Yi Qinghan smiled and rushed from the heaven-suppressing palace all the way to Jingfan Mountain. Now, his speed was as fast as teleportation. After an incense's time, Yi Qinghan appeared at the foot of Jingfan Mountain with his own strength. Yi Qinghan's steps were firm as he arrived at Jingfan Mountain again. As soon as he entered Jingfan Mountain, many memories flooded his mind. It was a pity that Zhang Fan left before he could enjoy Yi Qinghan's reward. Sigh, Yi Qinghan sighed softly, his heart was filled with regret. Immemorial Yin Yang, Yen Yu and Emperor Liang's plan had caused him and Yen Sovereign to lose too much. But he could not blame Emperor Liang. Moments later, Yi Qinghan arrived at the halfway point of the mountain. When he arrived at the training ground, he found that Jian Bugui was not there and there was only a group of children. The older children were already in their 20s and the younger ones were still in their infancy. He did not even know where Jian Bugui brought them here. Some of them were not even from the Kuang Fu Celestial Empire. No matter how old they were all people who did not cultivate. But their auras were different. It was an aura of righteousness, as if they were all great scholars. Some of the children were playing the zither, some were practicing writing, but all of them were filled with righteousness. These children were searching for another path. Yi Qinghan stood outside the training ground for a long time before slowly entering. These children seemed to recognize Yi Qinghan, even though they had never seen him before. This was because there was a portrait of Yi Qinghan in the hall. It was drawn by Jian Bugui himself, and it was very lifelike. "Greetings, Kuang Fu Celestial Master." These children were neither servile nor overbearing as they stood up and bowed slightly.